Вітаю! Сьогодні наш щомісячний вебінар Ukrainian Business Way. Як завжди, питання, які стосуються бізнесу, розвитку бізнесу, доступу до фінансування. Поки доєднується основна маса слухачів, я розповім про Ukrainian Business Way. І потім десь хвилин за 5-7 зазвичай я передам слово нашому експерту. Основна мова подій буде англійська, але я буду модерувати. Тож, Ukrainian Business Way, багато з вас нас знають, хтось вперше про нас чує. Ми вже майже 4 роки загалом з Об'єднаних Арабських Еміратів і 3 роки майже вже в Великій Британії проводимо події, заходи, конференції, форуми офлайн у Лондоні, Дубаї, на Кіпрі і онлайн. Є у нас закритий клуб експортерів, де ми допомагаємо виходити на міжнародні ринки українським компаніям. І робимо персональний партнер-метчинг і консультування. У нас завжди перевірені експерти, перевірені консультанти з будь-яких питань. Юристи, акаунтанти. Якщо у вас є якесь питання по бізнесу, у нас є чат, телеграм-чат, ви всі знаєте. Як хто не знає, подивіться в лист запрошення, підтвердження вебінару, там є посилання на наш телеграм, і ви зможете отримати реально професійну консультацію та перевірені рекомендації експертів, саме перевірені рекомендації. Це трохи про історію нашої спільноти, як вона розвивалася. Наразі це 3 філії. Ми першими провели бігмані шоу в Дубай, і одним із перших провели бізнес-подію про штучний інтелект на початку 2023 року, також у Дубаї. Наразі ми продовжуємо свою активність, з'єднуємо український бізнес з організаціями, потенційними покупцями в ключових локаціях. Географія розвивається, але, звичайно, ми проводимо нетворкінг-івенти, плюс освітні івенти. Продажі треба, щоб робили ви. І партнерство будувати – це також на вашій відповідальності. А в нас ви можете знайти, зустріти дійсно гарних потенційних партнерів. Більшість подій у нас безкоштовні, але для тих, хто хоче проявитися на наших подіях, охоплення у нас велике, то, будь ласка, ви можете стати нашим офіційним партнером. Цього місяця наш офіційний партнер – це Multipass. Євгенія презентувала компанію у нас на події буквально тиждень тому назад, і у них дуже гарні рішення для переводу бізнес-коштів з гривні у різні країни і отримання в Україну коштів, бо багато з вас, хто стикається, ви знаєте, що не просто переводити кошти з України в Україну, бо деякі банки, організації мають перепони з цим. А ось компанія Multipass, все офіційно, все дуже добре, все, що стосується платежів, переводу коштів між Україною і іншими країнами, у тому числі Британії, це взагалі британська організація. У нас є ще інші партнери, багато партнерів і в Україні, і за кордоном, і в Великій Британії. Ось також Збрек уже тепер також можна додати сюди логотип. І розширяємо постійно цю співпрацю. Запрошую закрити клуб експортерів, кого це цікавить. Деталі зараз не буду зупинятися. Будь ласка, пишіть мені в особисті або пишіть на оцю пошту. І всі деталі я надішлю стосовно партнерства. Партнерство дійсно у нас дуже цікавий медіапакет, підтримка, консультації. Будь-яким іншим питанням співпраці це ось мої контакти. Пишіть мені в WhatsApp, в Telegram, у нас є соціальні мережі, доєднуйтесь, в Телеграмі пишіть. Ну і що ж, ми переходимо вже до нашої сьогоднішньої теми. Перед тим, як представити вам спікера, Пата, я хочу показати результати нашого опитування стосовно нашої сьогоднішньої теми. І на питання, ось, чи орієнтуєтесь ви у своєму кредитному рейтингу у Великій Британії, But we are now discussing our polls, how companies orient in their credit score in Great Britain. About 40% partially, they maybe know, maybe don't know. It's like 20% of the from 36, they scored it as yes, they do know good about it. 22 don't know how to figure it out, and about 20 it's completely new topic for them. So most of the audience will 60% of the audience sorry, not 60, 40, 41% is just the audience that is really interesting, and it will be a lot of new information. And as for the question, I'm sorry, the other question, yes, we see that different options, different understanding on how to what is influencing for credit score. Most of them consider that it's in-time payment of the bills, credit history, and most of people don't understand what is there. And now Pat will answer your questions, and I stop sharing my screen. I introduce our speaker. Pat will tell about himself more, but I can tell you that it's a really good meeting. It was in London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We met on the event about how to fund small businesses, middle businesses in the UK. And I understood that Sprague and Samuel and Wilson Trust Fund can be really interesting for Ukrainian community about helping, about advising, and about possible financial support. And Pat, he's a financial business consultant. Now we cooperate with Ukrainian business, with Bragg, with Pat personally, and if you need some advices about the financial topic, funding topic, investment, or loans, Pat can support you, and he will tell you now the topic about business credit score in the UK.
Thank you, Violetta. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. So before I start sharing this particular presentation that I'm going to conduct with you, just a brief little background about myself. So my background is actually, first of all, in education. So I was a senior lecturer in the University of London, and my subjects were international business and corporate finance. I taught there for a good 7-10 years, and then I moved into private equity, where I raised quite a lot of money and bought and sold companies on behalf of very high net worth individuals. And now I am the senior business advisor for a particular charity called the Samuel Wilson's Loan Trust, which gives away business loans to pre-startups, startups, and SMEs in the UK, we are part of the City of London Corporation. We are a self-funding charity, so we don't raise any money. So whatever money has been left to us, that money is invested in the charity pool, and whatever interest we earn from that, we actually invest in new businesses. So my specialization is in private equity in terms of financial planning, in terms of investment plans, in terms of helping people who want to expand in the UK, for example, who want to set up businesses in the UK, who are looking for different kinds of funding, financing. Also includes things like credit risk, helping you to write your business plans and advising you on your financial forecasts, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So I will tell you a little bit more about the services I offer when I kind of finish this particular presentation. So let's start with the presentation first. If you have any questions or queries, it is preferable that you ask at the end of this particular presentation. Or if you think there is something urgent, for example, you can always raise your hands and ask the question, and we'll try our best to answer it. as well as possible, right? So, right. So we are talking about a very, very focused aspect, which is considered crucial, especially from the view of startups, pre-startups or SMEs who are looking to get some kind of funding. And we are going to talk about this in the UK context. It is important to talk about it in the UK context because my knowledge is obviously, my specialization obviously is in the UK market, but also some of this will apply to Europe as well. It is not going to be exactly the same, but some of the aspects are going to be kind of similar, right? So the credit score in terms of UK businesses, when we talk about the credit score, we are actually referring to complex statistical models that predict credit risk, right? So when we talk about the idea of prediction, we are talking about these complex statistical models helping us to understand what the credit risk is for your business today and what the credit risk is likely to be in the future. Credit risk in the UK is also referred to as the risk of default, right? So if you have taken a loan from a bank, you will have specific time periods, or in the kind of a contract with that particular bank, you will have specific time frames as to when you pay your interest and when you pay your capital back. So if you fail to pay your interest and capital when it is due, it is deemed to be a kind of a credit risk or default risk for that kind of bank, and it'll harm your credit position negatively in the UK, right? So in terms of this particular presentation, we are going to look at business credit score first. Okay, what do you mean by business credit score? We look at the intersection on business credit score and personal credit score in the sense that how your personal credit score sometimes influences or has an effect on your business credit score in relation to the ability of that particular business to improve things like creditworthiness and reduce default risk, particularly in the area of debt financing, right? We are also going to focus on the advantages of achieving a good credit score. How is it advantageous to businesses if they have a good credit score, especially in the UK? Factors that affect your business credit score, for example, and also, last of all, we focus on 8 important points which are absolutely crucial in terms of improving your credit score, right? So if your credit score is poor at the moment, so what do you need to do to kind of improve them? Right, so let's start off by looking at business credit scores first, right? So this particular explanation or definition is from an organization called Experian. Okay, they are one of the primary or foremost credit risk agencies here in the UK, right? So if you want your personal credit score or your business credit score, you can go to their website and apply to get a full credit report for your business or your personal credit report for a small fee. So Experian describes credit score as a business credit score, measure of business's creditworthiness. And this creditworthiness is made up of a number of factors which actually help to understand the financial position of a business and its financial risk. So a couple of things are important in this particular definition, right? First of all, it is talking about in terms of the business's creditworthiness, right? So when we talk about creditworthiness, we are talking about the ability of that particular business to repay their liabilities. So if the liability is a kind of a loan that you have taken, for example, if the liability is a little overdraft that you have with your bank, for example. So the idea is you will have to repay that loan when that particular loan is due. The better you do this, the better your creditworthiness will be, right? And this creditworthiness is made up of a number of factors which help you to understand the financial position of a business and also gives you a reflection or a light on the financial risk of that particular business, right? So in terms of financial risk for most businesses, especially in terms of debt financing, if you're looking for loans for your particular business, is reflected in the cash flow of that particular business, right? So if you apply for a loan, for example, if you're looking for a loan from the Samuel Wilson's Loan Trust, okay, we will actually ask you to submit a kind of a cash flow forecast, okay, for a particular year. That forecast will also help us to understand, what your kind of financial risks are, okay? Examples of financial risk could be, like I explained, the credit risk, whether you're able to pay your loan and the interest that is due on time, for example, and also focuses on things like liquidity risk, right? In terms of finance, when we talk of liquidity, liquidity is referred to as the ability of a company to repay its short-term liabilities. Okay, so when in finance in the UK, when we talk of short-term is usually referred to a period of 12 months. Okay, so anything that a business will owe, let's say you owe some money to your supplier, for example, okay, within those particular 12 months, is referred to as a short-term liability, and liquidity is a measure of whether you are actually able to repay that particular short-term liability, whether it's due. Okay, so financial risk examples in terms of credit risk, in terms of liquidity risk, right? So when we talk of things like in the second bullet point, business credit score is specific to a particular business and is based on the business's history of meeting its financial obligations, like, for example, payment to suppliers or payment to your lenders or payment to other creditors, like, for example, any bank or any financial institution, right? So financial obligations, again, also refer to short-term liquidity, i.e. the ability to repay short-term debt. We are talking about liabilities which arise and need to be repaid between 12 months. Cash flow forecasts, again, will reflect the company's ability to actually pay a particular loan in time or no. So if your cash flow forecast suggests that you have a cash surplus over a particular period of time, that you have excess cash in that particular company, that shows that you are able to meet your short-term liabilities, for example. The other thing which is helpful in terms of short-term liquidity and financial obligations is to look at what we refer to as a personal survival budget here in the UK, right? A personal survival budget measures what your income is, right? This is on an individual basis, what your income is and what your expenses are every month. And at the end of that, do you have a cash surplus or if you have a cash deficit? If you have a cash surplus, for example, that means any financial obligation that you have, you may very well be able to meet those financial obligations and your risks are relatively lower. If your personal survival budget, on the other hand, reflects that you have a cash deficit, i.e. your expenses are more than your income every month, that leads to your financial risks being considerably higher, okay, which obviously any lender or any bank that you apply for funding will take into account, right? So it says in the third bullet point, the credit scores can play a role in your business's overall success. Why? Because it says the credit score helps lenders, suppliers, and other creditors quickly evaluate whether your business will be able to pay your bills on time. And this is what creditworthiness is all about. So if you are getting raw materials from a particular supplier to manufacture a particular product, for example, right? And if, like in the UK, you have a kind of a contract with the supplier that you're going to pay the supplier either in 30 days time or in 45 days time or in 90 days time, for example, do you actually have the liquidity in your business to honor that particular time frame, right? So if you have a contract with your supplier which says you'll pay the supplier in 45 days time, are you able to honor that kind of contract, for example? If you are able to honor that contract, i.e. pay that amount of money when it is exactly due, then we say that your business is actually creditworthy, for example, which refers that your payment history or your financial risks in that particular area is particularly sound. Okay, so it suggests creditworthiness comprises, number one, credit risk, for example, and affordability. Okay, so credit risk referring to the risk of default and whether you can repay the debt when it is actually due. And when we talk about affordability here in the UK, affordability is a very, very important concept for all banks and financial institutions, specifically those which lend money to businesses. Now, most of you will be aware, or many of you who are doing businesses in the UK will be aware, that most lenders in the UK are actually bound by FCA directives, right? Referred to as the Financial Conduct Authority directives. The Financial Conduct Authority directives, one of the most important directives are all these financial institutions have to be seen to be a responsible lender, right? i.e., the banks or the financial institutions can only lend money to businesses if they are confident that those particular businesses have the ability to repay that particular loan back, right? So, how do banks and financial institutions in the UK find out about who is the responsible lender or no? So, they will carry out their own due diligence, for example, due diligence in the form of these kinds of credit risks and credit scores, for example, and then actually decide whether they're going to give you that kind of money or the loan that you have asked for. If they find the risk is high, obviously the rate of interest that will charge will be higher, and the kind of collateral they will ask for will also be equivalent to those kinds of risks, for example, right? So it has huge implications for this particular business, and it also reflects the potential risk of lending to those particular businesses as well. Right. Next, we are going to focus on this aspect of a personal credit score. So we are talking in terms of the individual rather than the business here, right? So it says personal credit score relates to an individual's financial behavior. So we are talking about one particular individual, okay, and calculated on the basis of history of the prepaying personal debts. So if you have a loan, for example, are you being able to pay that loan back on time? Okay. So for example, if you have credit card bills, whether you're able to manage and pay those credit card bills on time. If you have a mortgage to buy a house in the UK, whether you are actually honoring your mortgage payments on time. So lenders, i.e. banks, financial institutions in the UK, will use the personal credit score to assess to find out the risk of lending to that individual for personal purposes. For example, if you want to get a loan to buy a car for domestic use, for example, right? So as I mentioned here, the higher the risk, the higher will be your interest rate, for example, right? And it says sometimes a business credit score and personal credit score can intersect. So this is why sometimes your personal credit scores become important in the business context, for example, right? So let's say, for example, you are thinking of starting a business in the UK. You do not have a most viable product here. Your plans are in the ideation stage. So you are thinking of applying for a pre-revenue loan from, let's say, the British Business Bank, right? So the British Business Bank is happy to give you a pre-revenue loan. The maximum they give out is £25,000, and the interest they charge is 6%, for example. Because you don't have a more viable product, for example, because you don't have revenues coming in, for example, you're a pre-revenue company, your personal credit score becomes important then. Okay. So they will ask you about things like, apply to the personal credit score from a credit rating agency in the UK, for example, either Experian, for example, or Dun& Bradstreet, for example. And they will take that credit score into account before they decide whether to give you a loan, even though the loan may be used for business purposes. Okay. So in many circumstances, for example, if your business is in a pre-startup stage, your business is in the startup stage, for example, hasn't earned any revenue, for example, the business credit score becomes very, very important. And this is where it influences your individual business score, kind of influences your business credit score, right? So for SMEs, small and medium scale enterprises, where companies may not have long credit history, for example, so you are a relatively new company, you don't have that history of credit, for example, lenders may consider their own personal credit score when deciding whether to approve a particular loan. And so it becomes important to maintain a good personal credit score because business owners, that credit score will reflect on the business's ability to get that kind of loan, right? So the question arises, if your personal credit score is important in the context of getting a business loan and it influences the business credit score, how do you improve that personal credit score? One of the first ways and one of the most easiest ways, for example, is to make repayments in full and on time. That can help lenders to understand that you're sensible with your money and you can pay back when you actually borrow. So making repayments in full and on time is the first and most important thing, right? The other thing is, if you have credit cards that you've never used, it is helpful to close those accounts down, okay? Or for example, if you have already have significant amount of credit available and you have multiple credit cards or large overdrafts, lenders may view this as being a kind of a negative and it reflects negatively on your personal credit score. In the UK, registering on the electoral roll to vote, for example, can give lenders proof of your name and address. It allows them to verify your identity and helps them to combat things like identity fraud, which also helps you improve the credit score. And lastly, and most importantly, cutting financial ties with people with poor credit history. Okay. So if you have joined or combined finances with someone who has a poor credit score, right? It is better to cut financial ties with that particular person, right? So many people will in the UK will have things like a joint mortgage, for example, or a joint credit card, for example, with someone else. Okay. So if the other person's credit history is not good enough, is poor, then it's better to cut financial ties with that particular person because it influences that particular credit score negatively. So we are talking about the advantages of a good business credit score. So what are the inherent advantages because of which you should always aim to achieve a good business score? Okay. So the suggestion is a good business score can help you access finance and investments for your particular company, right? So the idea of a good business score is it reflects your ability to manage finances and also gives an idea of how good are you or what skills do you possess in terms of your financial management, right? The most important thing on the basis of all the bullet points that are mentioned here is a good business score will give you options, right? In terms of the ability to choose between various forms of financing, for example. So in terms of business financing, we are talking in terms of debt financing, we are talking in terms of equity financing, or we are talking about the mixture between debt and equity financing, for example. So it gives you more options. The better your business score, the better chances of you are in power then, right, to kind of choose which kind of option that you might go for. Again, because you have the advantage of a good business score, for example, you can also have more negotiating power, especially when it comes to deciding on interest rates, for example, especially when it comes to deciding on collateral, for example, in terms of assets that you're ready to give away for that particular business loan. And it gives you access to finances in times of need, right? So, for example, in terms of economic downturns, for example, here in the UK, we found that most businesses, including multinational businesses, had huge concerns with working capital requirements. So, short-term financing, for example, if you have a good business score, for example, banks or financial institutions are more than ready to give you that kind of money. Or if you're looking for short-term overdrafts on your account, for example, in terms of need, right? Having a good business score can be hugely advantageous because the probability of you getting that kind of money is much, much higher, right? So it says here in the second bullet point, as well as providing extra funds at crucial times, it can also save your business's money by making you eligible for better deals and lower interest rates. So as I suggested, the less your risk, okay, the less the interest rates are going to be. The better your business score, the better your interest rates you can get. The lower your interest rates you will be able to achieve. And lastly, it says, a good score could help you bring a great new supplier or partner on board, agree more flexible credit terms, or win valuable new businesses, for example, right? So understanding the financial risks, for example, it says it is likely that new suppliers and partners will complete a company credit check before agreeing to do business with you or agreeing credit terms. This is quite true in the UK, for example, right? If you want to form a kind of a partnership with the supplier, that supplier will carry out a credit check on you, right? And they will, based on that particular credit check, they will decide whether to actually do business with you and also agree credit terms, i.e., when you will repay them back. Okay, so for example, if your business credit score is good, for example, they might extend that short-term credit limit to, let's say, for 90 days instead of 45 days or 60 days, for example, right? Now, this also works the other way as well. Okay, so at a time when many businesses struggling, taking the time to check the credit score of new suppliers or other partners and business clients has also become very, very important, right? Understanding the financial risk of the business you work with will help you manage cash flows and also avoid bad debt and fraudulent activity by alerting you to any red flags about those particular partners, right? And it also helps you save the time and money it takes to chase late payments, for example. Sorry, Violeta, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, it's really important point. I conduct financial webinars too, and I always advise to check credit score, to check history of your potential client, supplier, especially client who wants to have the payment like some payment in some time. So always check the credit score, or always check this history of the company before going to the new partnership, new relationship in business. Yeah, it's really important. At the same way, partners look at you. That's why it's important. Yes. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
very true. What Violeta said is very true, actually. So, for example, when we give away loans as a charity to small businesses, we are carrying out due diligence on that particular business as well in terms of their ability to repay it back. Similarly, when that business is forming relationship with various other partners, for example, it is imperative that the business carries out their own due diligence on those particular partners. And a good credit score is vital in understanding whether those particular credit agreements or financial agreements that you have with your suppliers, for example, with other business partners, for example, okay, how good those particular financial terms would be, or whether those financial terms will actually be honored, right? The next slide talks about calculating your business credit score. Okay. So in the UK, for example, we have what is referred to as the credit reference agencies, or CRAs, okay, who collect and maintain information on individuals and on business credit behavior in the UK. Okay. So in terms of the most famous or the most well-known ones in the UK, we have Experian, we have Equifax, and we have Dun& Bradstreet, right? So you can go to any of their particular websites, for example, right? You can look at, or you can apply for an individual or business credit score, for example. They will charge you a small fee, and you will be able to receive a credit score, let's say within maximum for a day or a week's time, for example, right? Now, in terms of Experian, it suggests in the last bullet point, scores or the calculations are based on various things. So Experian, Equifax, Dun & Bradstreet might calculate credit scores in different ways, right? So they will take into account things like your business's payment history, for example, whether you have been able to honor those payments when it is due, whether you have defaulted on any particular payments, for example, the total amount of debt that your business actually has, the total amount of borrowings, total amount of loans that they may have, when you held that particular credit, for how long did you hold that credit, the type of finance that you have actually, whether it's based on debt, whether it's based on equity, or whether it's a mixture of both, and any financial implications or any financial applications that you have recently made. For example, if you're an individual and you have applied for a credit score, for example, credit report, for example, that credit report will always contain, right, the different loans or the different credit cards that you may have applied for example. So it gives you all that kind of information, right? So credit rating agencies then take all these different factors that I've spoken about to generate your business credit score, although the method they use and the scores they give you might actually vary, right? So in terms of experience, it suggests scores range from 0 to 100, with 0 representing high risk and 100 representing a very, very low risk. Okay, so you can see this in the form of this particular diagram. Okay, so 80 or over low risk, 40 to 80 medium risk, and below 40 is considered as high risk as far as business credit scores are concerned, right? So when they talk about 80 or over, it suggests a business credit risk over 80 is typically considered to be an excellent credit score. It could also help you access things like better deals or financial products like business loans, including lower interest rates. A score of 40 to 80, you could be asked to provide additional information by lenders or other businesses such as suppliers to help them understand your financial position and creditworthiness, especially if your score is at the lower end of the range, i.e., closer to 40. And if your business credit score is 40 and below, usually lenders are looking for credit scores above 40 before they will agree to a loan, for example. Providing additional information may help, but your business credit rating could still impact the decision. Similarly, it could put other businesses off working with you as well, right? So this is just one of the examples of a company calculating your business credit score, i.e. Experian. Dun & Bradstreet, for example, will calculate it in a totally different way, for example. Equifax, on the other hand, will calculate in different ways because they are using different statistical models to actually design the credit scores for that particular business, right? So what are the different factors that actually have an impact on your business credit score? In the UK, the first thing is company accounts or the type of accounts you file, right? So at the end of every financial year, all companies, whether you're a small and medium scale enterprise, whether you're a sole trader or a limited company, you must file their accounts in the company's house, okay, or company tax return, for example, in HM Revenue and Customs, right? So the suggestion is it is important to file the accounts fully, right? Rather than submitting abbreviated or micro entity accounts. Okay, so for example, one of the ways I do due diligence is whenever a company applies for a particular loan, I will go to the company's house, right, website, type the name of the company or the company number, for example, and immediately I will get the information on that particular company. I can also look at the kind of accounts that they have submitted. Most of the companies nowadays will submit what is called an abridged, okay, a micro entity account. Okay, the suggestion here is instead of submitting a micro entity account, you should file your full accounts, right? Very often a micro entity account will only include your balance sheet. When they're talking about filing your full accounts, they are talking about filing your balance sheet and your income statement, i.e. the profit and loss account statement, which gives you the idea of how the company has performed throughout that particular financial year. Okay, so file full accounts with HMRC and company's house rather than abridged or micro entity accounts. These accounts must be filed on time and in line with HMRC guidelines so that you can provide more data about the financial health of your particular business. Okay, so the more data you provide there, the better it is for your credit score, because most of the credit rating agencies will also try and take that data from HMRC, okay, to actually develop a kind of a business score, right? For example, if any of your business information changes, such as your registered office address, update it quickly with HMRC and Companies House, and also at the same time notify suppliers, partners, and customers. This will help to keep your business credit score data accurate and also up to date as well. So this is the first and most important thing in terms of your company accounts as well, trying to file the company accounts on time and trying to file the full company accounts instead of a shortened form of this particular company accounts, right? The second important thing talks about your credit history and building up that credit history, right? So the history of paying bills in a timely manner can affect your credit scores. Okay, for example, if you have overheads, if you have an office space and if you have overheads, for example, your gas bills, your electricity bills, for example, your telephone bills, all these need to be paid on time, for example, right? Get in the habit of paying all of your business bills on time to avoid any particular negative outcomes. So the idea of building up a credit history, okay, establishing a credit history will help to demonstrate your business's creditworthiness, i.e., that you have the ability to pay the dues on time. You could do this by applying for short-term business loan, for example, or a credit facility, i.e., a kind of an overdraft in the UK. As long as you use these opportunities responsibly and ensure timely repayments, this will help to build a positive credit history. And in the long term, this could make it easier for your business to access larger amounts of loan in the future. The next important thing is to avoid county court judgments, CCJs, and insolvency proceedings. Now, in the UK, when we talk about county court judgments, okay, you will get a county court judgment if someone takes court action against you, saying that you owe them money and you haven't responded to that particular judgment, right? You have made no effort to contact them, either through email or by post, for example. If you get a judgment, this means that the court has formally decided that you actually owe the other party money. The judgment will usually come in post and will explain how much you owe them, how to pay them in full or in installments, the deadline for paying, and who you are actually paying that kind of money. Right? Records of these particular judgments are kept for 6 years until unless you pay the full amount within a particular month, and this can make it hard to get credit. So avoid county court judgments at all time. If someone has challenged you in terms of the amount of money you owe them, it is always better to actually communicate with those particular people straight away, right? And to find some kind of a solution between them. Insolvency proceedings, okay? Insolvency in the UK, insolvency laws are different in different parts of Europe, right? So as far as the UK is concerned, insolvency arises when individuals or businesses have insufficient assets to cover their debts or are unable to pay their debts when they're supposed to pay them. So you are unable to pay their debts because you do not have the money to actually repay them. Okay, so you should also avoid these kinds of insolvency proceedings and try and find some kind of a solution between the party who you owe that kind of money and come to some kind of agreement with them. Right. The last bit of this particular presentation deals with improving your business credit score and the 8 important points that you need to take care of. Okay, the first one and the most common one, ensure that you pay your bills on time, right? Making punctual payments to all suppliers, to all lenders, utility providers like electricity providers, for example, okay? Companies which provide heating for you, for example, right? So making punctual payments to suppliers, lenders, utility providers, and creditors is a crucial way to build a good credit business score and avoid any negative impact on your business credit score. Avoid any bounced or rejected payments. Okay. When we talk of bounced payments, talking about maybe you give a check to someone for £600 but your bank account only has £300. Okay, so obviously the check is bouncing. That will reflect negatively on your credit score as well. The second one is, this is something that the businesses should continuously do. Check your credit score. Okay, let's say, for example, every year or every 6 months or every 8 months, for example. The idea of checking those credit scores is you're checking if there are any errors, for example, if there are any errors in inaccuracies, you can actually raise that with the credit rating agency. Or if there's any fraudulent activity that could negatively affect or impact your credit score, you could actually raise it with them. Okay. So to ensure that your business credit score is accurate, by using the credit review service, okay, with Experian, Equifax, Dun& Bradstreet, and Capitalize. So if you go on their particular web page, for example, you will see that there is this credit review service which they have, and you can apply, okay, to get your business credit scores checked every now and then, because it is advantageous in terms of identifying errors, inaccuracies, or any fraudulent activity as far as your business is concerned. The third one, as I have already explained before, build up credit history. Establish a credit history will help you to demonstrate your business's creditworthiness. Also, do this by applying for short-term business loans or a credit facility like an overdraft. Repay that particular loan on time, repay the interest and the capital when it is due, for example. It helps up to build that particular credit history, which reflects in terms of future. If you're looking to raise large sums of money, that you have the ability, or you have actually honored all your short-term debts, for example. As long as you use these responsibly and ensure timely payments, this will help you to build a positive credit history. Lastly, it says, in the long term, this could make it easier for your business to access larger amounts of time in the future. So you see, when we talk about building credit history here, it is not only helping you get credit a good deal today, but it also help you get future credit, okay, at a particular cheaper interest rate maybe, okay, and the probability of getting larger sums of money in the future is always better if you have built up a good credit history. Right? The fourth important point is maintaining good relationship with your suppliers and your lenders. So talking in terms of establishing a track record of trust, establishing reliability with other businesses by meeting all financial obligations and communicating openly with suppliers and lenders. So the idea is, if you have difficulty with cash, or for example, if you have difficulty with paying those particular suppliers and lenders on time, it is better that you communicate openly with those particular suppliers and come to some kind of agreement. Okay. Maybe saying that, okay, we cannot pay you in 45 days time as was agreed, but we are trying our best to pay you within, let's say, 60 days time. Okay. This open communication ensures that this is not reflected badly by the suppliers on your credit score, for example. If you have any outstanding debts, ensure to settle these as soon as you can to avoid any creditors reporting late payments to credit reference agencies, for example. Okay, again, have this kind of communication with them. Let them know that you're going to be late in repaying a particular installment of that particular debt, so that those lenders actually do not let the credit reference agencies know, right? Number 5, avoid multiple loan applications at once. Okay, so this reflects badly on your credit score. Okay, if you apply for more than one loan at a particular point of time. Because every time you apply for the loan, the bank or financial institution, i.e. the lender, will run a hard credit check on your business. Okay, too many consecutive credit checks could harm your business's credit score. So you should try and avoid too many in a short period of time. So they always say, for example, when individuals here in the UK are applying for credit cards, for example, you will most probably go through websites like Money Saving Expert to see whether you're eligible for a particular credit card, for example. Okay, how much credit they will give you on that particular card, for example, right? The moment you apply for one, that will reflect on your credit score. So you should avoid maybe applying for or looking for another credit card in 3 to 6 months time. Okay, give it that kind of time before you apply for another one. So it is similar to businesses as well, similar for businesses as well. If you do not need to look for a business loan, you should work with an expert, i.e. a financial advisor, for example, who can help you determine a small pool of lenders best suited for your particular needs, for example. So becomes very, very crucial. Not every lender is suitable for your business. So the idea is to work with a kind of a financial expert who will be able to identify the lender who is best suited for your particular business needs, who shares the same kind of, let's say, for example, objective that you have for your particular business, who shares the same kind of culture, for example, or the belief system that you have and your business, so both of you can actually work together, right? Other than that, run credit checks on the businesses you work with, right? So being aware of any risks to your business by checking the credit profiles of the companies that you work with, whether they are suppliers, for example, whether they are other lenders, for example. So by running credit checks, you will be able to see if any customers, suppliers, or partners, for example, are potentially facing financial difficulty, so you can take early action. It is a kind of, you preempt the whole thing, right? Point number 7, file company accounts on time. As I have mentioned before, company accounts, key sources of information for credit bureaus and are the biggest contributor to business credit score. So it is important that you don't delay filing your accounts in a consistent manner. You should also try to ensure that all the directors' details are kept up to date and confirmation statements are filed on time. So in the UK, confirmation statements have to be filed annually once every year, right? The confirmation statements confirm that your basic company information is correct and it is up to date. The information can include things like your registered office address, officers in the particular company, the description of your business, i.e. which particular industry you belong to, share capital, and your shareholders. If any information needs to be updated, you must file these changes using the relevant form before submitting the confirmation statements. And lastly, bullet point number 8, maintain a healthy cash flow, right? If your business bank accounts are enrolled to share data with credit reference agencies, you should ensure that these reflect a healthy cash flow. The idea is your cash flow should always reflect a kind of a cash surplus rather than a cash deficit. A cash surplus will suggest that the cash that is coming into the business is more than the cash that is going out of that particular business. And it says it is also best to close accounts which are not active, as this will negatively impact your business score as well. So any account that you have, it is best to close or shut those accounts down, as this will negatively impact your business scores, especially in the UK. Right, so this is as far as the presentation is concerned on business credit scores and individuals credit scores. So we have looked at the importance of business credit scores, intersection of business and your personal credit score, factors which have an impact or which affect your business credit score, and the 8 points which you need to concentrate and focus on, or which you need to manage to improve that business credit score. Right. So this is as far as this particular presentation is concerned. So these are my details, right? You have my LinkedIn post here. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you have my email as well. The last thing to say here is, as I mentioned previously before I started this particular presentation, that my specialization is in terms of helping companies access different kinds of finance, especially in the UK, right? So if you're thinking of starting a particular business, for example, in the UK, if you have a business in the UK, for example, you want to expand, if you're thinking of exploring the UK market, for example, I can provide customized business advice, but obviously I will provide that advice for a particular fee, for example, right? I can advise pre-startups. So if you have just an idea, for example, if you want to take that idea forward, if you want to find out whether that idea is feasible, it's viable or no, If you have a startup already and you have an MVP and you want to develop that MVP and the market even further, if you are an SME, for example, wanting to explore UK market, establish, develop your business in the UK, or if you want advice on business plans, financial forecasting, investment and financial planning, risk assessment, and identifying various financial options and getting your business ready for financing. This is one of the things is very, very important, I think, because most businesses at a certain point of time will say, oh, Pat, I want to raise some kind of money. And if I look at that particular business, for example, I will immediately be able to tell you, your business is not actually ready for financing because the creditors, or for example, if you want equity, for example, it will be rejected straight away. So I can get that particular business ready for financing. So if you need any kinds of business advice, you can either drop me an email, contact me by LinkedIn, or obviously you can also get in touch through Violeta as well, and we can both get in touch with you. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope the session was helpful to you. I will take any questions or queries or clarifications that you have.
Yes, but thank you. It was really structured, very valuable information. Each point, like bullet point. I don't even try to translate it because I should translate the whole presentation because every information was really important.
Thank you.
I will switch a little bit in Ukrainian
Yeah.
right now. Я дякую нашому експерту. Якщо хто не до кінця зрозумів англійську мову, то вам треба просто на меншій швидкості переслухати запис, запис буде. Бо ось просто кожен пункт, що казав Пат, він настільки важливий, щоб, по-перше, мати доступ до фінансів, перевірити ваших контрагентів, бути самим готовими до великих контрактів, до інвестицій. But we had one event in this break last week, and some of our entrepreneurs shared their experience and such a huge amount of mistakes. I think our business culture is to try and then we'll see what to do. Then we will like resolve these issues later on. But it all influences credit rating score. And then after all these mistakes, not even when we fix them, we are going to get a loan and get rejection. That's why your presentation today is really much important. I will promote it in our channels because I understand that we should at first be more precise, more accurate in this business culture because everything is record, everything is influencing. And then before going for finance, before going for scaling, we should check and fix mistakes. In Ukrainian business culture, understand we can do many mistakes and not check them before going further. Тому, будь ласка, перевіряйте себе, перевірте ваш бізнес-кредитний скор. Пат показав, де це зробити, як це зробити. Це буде недорого. Перевіряйте, дивитесь. Якщо бачите, що там щось таке, що краще не бачити, то ви вже знаєте, до кого звернутися. Рекомендуйте, запис буде у нас на Ukrainian бізнесовий YouTube каналі. І якщо хтось зараз має питання, то ви можете або вимкнути мікрофон, або пишіть ваше питання в чат, ну або ви вже маєте LinkedIn Пата, то тоді на LinkedIn або через нас також можете писати свої особисті питання. Yes, thank you, Pat, a lot. It was really valuable, and our attendees just right there, thank you. I'm sure that in strategic point of view, as a record, as a pack of information, very valuable each point, it will work further. And let's meet some other topic, for example, how to draw investment for startups, for IT startups from Ukraine. In Ukraine, there are many IT startups. I know that you are you have these connections with venture funding investors and different funds, and you can prepare, for example, IT company, IT startup for investment. Yes?
Yes, thank you, Violeta. So I have actually, through the Ukrainian Business Way and through Violeta, I have met some businesses here. I've had discussions with them as well. And what Violeta suggested in terms of, cultural barriers that you have, it is quite common. For example, When I was doing investing, for example, for investors to buy companies in the UK, to start negotiation with them, to understand the cultural traits there, their belief systems there, is quite different to starting negotiation, for example, with a company in Copenhagen, a Danish company, for example, or with a company, for example, in Berlin, or with a company, for example, in Madrid, right? So these cultural traits often become a kind of a barrier, but it shouldn't be a kind of a barrier for most businesses to understand. So I have spoken to many businesses, and when I talk about, what is expected in the UK in terms of, let's say, for example, due diligence checks, for example, what investors will be looking for in your particular business, for example. Sometimes for Ukrainian businesses, that can be a bit shocking. For example, they say, right, I'm not quite sure of how it works here, so that is why I've come. So if you need any kind of advice like that, I am more than happy to give you that kind of advice because I have that background. I have the theoretical knowledge, for example, I have the practical experience of investing as well, for example, and I can definitely help you, kind of break those barriers down and to develop your business ideas, or if you have a product, to develop that product, to develop that market for your particular business even further. So please, please do get in touch with me or Violetta, and we can help you achieve, whatever goals and whatever aims that you have as far as your business is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. So I don't say you goodbye because I'm sure that we will meet at some other occasions, events, or maybe even webinars. Thank you, everyone. You will see the record. Everyone who wants, please welcome. Thank you,
Thank
Pat,
you very
once
much.
again.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good evening. Bye. Bye.